his foot coming to bed. I sing him Turaluralura. And add Molly Malone too. Okay?
I can't sing.
Do as best you can, but I can ask you to do it sort of loud, okay? Because the microphone only picks up things that are, you know, a whisper won't really make it.
It's an Irish often dreams I'd wander to that far-off shore where Margaret mother sang to me so oft in days of yore. To-ra-ra-ra-ra, 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 to the Dublin's fair city, where the girls are so pretty, I first set my eyes on sweet Molly. Sure she was a fishmonger, and sure 'twas no wonder, for so were her father and mother before. She died of the fever. There was no one could save her, and that was the end of sweet Molly Malone. So now her ghost whiz her barrow through streets wide and narrow, crying, Toggles and Muggles, alive, 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 alive. Crying cockles and muckles alive, alive, alive.
Very good.
Thank you.
It would be nice if I could sing.
Well, we all grew up hearing you sing just like that. Which is
And
beautiful.
as Danny put it, she went to sleep so you didn't have to hear it. Okay.
And I have here a list of questions that all your children, most of your children, had a chance to write down. The things for you to respond to get memories that they have. They'd like to hear you say once more. Okay. So somebody requested that you relate to us one humorous event from the childhood of each of your 8 children.
Well, I'll start with Brian.
Kind of loud.
Brian was really a good little boy
Perfect is the word.
until he was in the 1st grade. And he used to come home from St. Philomena's for lunch, and we thought it was such a long, 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 long walk, but it was actually shorter than from here to St. Anne's. But one day, in early January, Brian never got home for lunch. I was frantic. I called the school, I called the police, I just didn't know what to think. And then he walked in the door beaming from ear to ear with his arms full of broken toys. It was after Christmas. And he knew Daddy could fix them. And he made the announcement that every rubbish day I could expect him to be late. And this was even before I knew about garage sales.
Or picking dirt.
But Brian knew that Daddy could fix anything that was broken and all the toys. What happened to them, I don't remember. That was Brian.
Do you remember that?
Danny was the first one that I had to put a harness on. The first time I lost him was in the backyard in Stowe. Brian knew that the shrubs were our border. You didn't pass the shrubs. We didn't have a fence. But Danny had to explore. We had empty lots around us. They were overgrown with weeds, and you couldn't see Danny for weeds. And he was giggling while I tried to find him, calling. So before I had time for a harness, he had a clothesline around his waist, and he was tied to the middle of the yard. So he had a lot of freedom, and you couldn't get away from him. And Susan was the little perfectionist. Learned how to sew very, very young. was very fussy about things matching and things being coordinated. And she was so fussy, and it took her so long to spend a dime, they asked her not to come back to the dime store. And Kathleen added to the gray hairs the first time that it snowed when she was in the first grade. She couldn't bring herself to waste time to come home for lunch because she'd rather play in the snow. So she sat in the lunchroom and pretended she was chewing. And then she finished her lunch before anybody else, and she had a lot of time to play. And Mary was the one who loved the color purple, and she couldn't say it. And she knew that all the houses in heaven have to be purple. Otherwise, what's the point in going to heaven if everything is purple?
Bubble.
And Sharon drove me frantic with the crossed eyes. Just
She can still do it. Did you just do it?
and Colleen gets me to can cross her eyes as soon as Colleen. As soon as she stops carrying her dollies by the hair on the head and by their arms and by their legs. And then comes Mark. And I remember Mark in kindergarten when we had, what would you have called it, a tornado? He was so little and so frail, he almost blew away from St. Anne's. He had to hang onto the railing in front of the school before it was safe to walk home. And what else about Mark?
His imaginary friend.
Oh,
The
Mark had a
cowboy.
cowboy. Oh, we always had to have a seat beside him at the table for his cowboy. They played ball all the time. The cowboy always caught the ball, and Mark always caught the one from the cowboy. And Mark loved to wear Brian's hats. They never fit him, but he loved them. And when Lenahans moved next door and Pat was introducing Mark to his daughters so he'd have playmates, Mark didn't need any playmates because he had one. Timmy was his playmate. Timmy Clement. And then Johnny comes along. And I don't think I saved Martin Danny's harness. I had to get a new one. And everyone was so thrilled with the new little brother. And I needed my rest, and everyone came home with their buddies from school to show this precious, wonderful baby. We had company by the droves. And then Johnny made the stage debut. He was 2 months old at Beaumont. They had a pageant, and each vocation that was possible was portrayed. In fact, Susan was the Blessed Mother that day on stage. And Bonnie Quincy was the housewife and mother, and Johnny was the baby. They had an airline stewardess, they had a secretary, they had a nurse, but Johnny was on stage. But even though you drove me crazy, I kept you. You were worth having. The bonus that turned out not to be a tumor. Even though I was too old to have a baby anymore, I really did it. It was a good idea.
I'm glad.
And as Daddy put it, oh, and then I didn't know how the rest of the children would react when I announced I was pregnant. Daddy's reaction was, God knows what he's doing. Should be good. Mark's reaction was, good, now you don't have to rock me anymore. Mark is 5 years old, and probably as big as you, and I still rock him every night. Would you want to be rocked every night? No. He didn't bark, but he allowed me to do it. But I've been blessed. I've been very fortunate. God's been good.
One person you haven't talked about yet is our father. Tell us about how you met him.
Well, I was hired to be a file clerk at Westinghouse Supply down at 40th, which is now Blonder's, 40th and Prospect. And my first day at work, I got home. No, I don't think it was the first day because I was just the file clerk. And after I was there 2 days, Daddy asked Mr. Sidway, could I please be his secretary? So that was what my mother wanted to find out, what's my boss like. So I said, oh, he's nice. And he's got beautiful brown eyes. And her reaction was, Margaret, you've got your future. And I said, Mom, don't be silly, he's married. Because his sister Lillian, who's 10 years his senior, worked there, and I thought 2 people named Liderbach were husband and wife. And Lillian never showed her age. I mean, she was sharp and you know. And I knew that dating was forbidden, so I wouldn't go out with him for a long, long time. And he knew which streetcar I would come to work on, and he used to drive along, tooting the horn and beckoning, and get off the car and come and go for a ride. So one thing led to another, and then I got fired because I broke the rule.
Because he picked you up.
But no, because we were going out. They found out. And then he got mad and he quit. And that's why he left Westinghouse and went to GE.
That's a good reason.
Yeah. But he was a good man. People used to get sick to death hearing me brag about what he was doing. And then we had our Bugco group, and they used to get sick to death hearing me brag about my children. There goes Margaret again, talking about the kids.
Well, Dan and I used to sit up at the top of the stairs and listen to you brag about us, and we thought it was pretty neat.
Well, when I was a child, my mother and dad, they used to have their little group, the Kleins and the Gillespies and the Coins, took turns visiting each other's home. And they'd roll up the rugs, and John Klein would play my mother's violin, and they would dance the Irish jigs. We were supposed to be in bed, but we'd sit at the top of the steps too, and we'd peek up and enjoy it all. And my mother and dad were the first in the little group to have a car. My dad taught me to drive when I was 13, and I'll never know why he never taught anybody else.
Don't say that too loudly.
But my biggest thrill driving was when Father Jimmy arrived from Ireland. I was 13 years old. And my father couldn't take off from work, so I was to meet him at the train station. There used to be one in East Cleveland, near Superior and Euclid. And Father Jimmy didn't get off the train. And I called home, and my mother said, well, she'd see what was going on and call me back. So here he got off downtown, so I drove downtown. I was ecstatic. I was thrilled, silly. So that's a memory I have. It's vivid.
Next question.
Okay.
What would you wish most for each of us? Or what advice would you like to give each of your children? Wait till the class finishes. Think about it.
You can't really live without faith in God. You have to thank God for your blessings. If you have problems, you pray to God to be solved. Pray for acceptance. And look for the silver lining in the tunnel, because they're always around. But don't ever think you can get along without faith, because you can't. You need God's help. And He sure does turn it quickly. And I think mostly I turn to the Carmelites whenever I have a problem. We just prayed that I'd make proper decisions and I'd do the right thing with the money that I had. Spend it wisely. And in spite of it, I bought a new kitchen. With the help of all my children, except Susan and Dan. But I've got to get something out of them when they come home. They'll help. But I thank God for my children and for my grandchildren. I've been blessed.
So have we. That's for sure.
Daddy missed too much.
It's not missing. Our next question. What do you think is your greatest strength, your best asset, aside from your faith, that has made you the person you are?
I think living through the Depression made me appreciate the value of
Appreciate
money.
crush there.
I think I squeezed my pennies hard, and I think that anybody that lived through the Depression was better for it. And I don't want that you have to have a depression, but I wish you can save money.
No more phone
Write
calls.
letters.
No more phone calls.
No phones. Fewer phone calls. Fewer phone calls. More letters.
Anything else?
No.
How did you keep your sanity with a house full of children?
The grace of God. The funniest thing, looking back, after I had Brian and Danny and the third pregnancy came on, and I thought, no way could I handle another boy. No way.
Wait a minute.
And so I turned to Father Fleming and I asked him to pray that this would be a girl with my mother's red hair and my husband's brown eyes. And he said he would, and he didn't laugh at me. Susan was born, and I wrote Father Fleming and thanked him for his prayers. They were answered. And he still didn't laugh at me. No, I survived with the grace of God. And His Holy Mother, as my mother would say. The grace of God.
She was a feminist.
Pardon?
She was a feminist.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Grace of God, His Holy Mother. I had good parents. I had very, very, very good parents.
Since we're thinking back now to your parents when you were growing up, tell us about some of your very earliest memories.
Well, I think I was taught to, my mother would send me periodically with the Mass offering, Masses to the Sacred Heart for her special intentions. This is the way my mother survived. And we were taught to be proud if we didn't have whatever we might have wanted. We didn't ever complain. It used to irritate her that Emmy wouldn't, she called it putting on a poor mouth. Don't complain, count your blessings. And pray. Turn to God for any problem.
What are your earliest memories of your father?
Well, my father worked hard. He worked long hours. Where's my horse and wagon? What'd you do with it? This is the way he supported us. Yeah, put the horse and wagon. That's my dad. And he was well loved. He had his bakery route in the Collinwood area. And I was a little bit resentful because kids in my room whose mothers bought from him called him Tim. And I
That's all right.
There we go.
Okay. So you were upset.
And my dad's, yeah, I thought they had one or found my father raised him. But they all loved him. And my father was just as devout a Catholic as my mother was. After he had the stroke and he couldn't talk, he said his prayers as fervently and as clearly and as distinctly as you couldn't believe. He never missed his prayers in the morning or at night. and my mother spoiled him. Every morning of his life, he had a 3.5-minute soft-boiled egg and hot oatmeal. And when he came here to live with me, if the egg wasn't 3.5 minutes, I had to do another one.
It sure better be 3.5 minutes, that's right. I learned that.
And another thing, he used to like a bottle of beer at bedtime.
Bottle of what?
Beer.
Preferably Guinness Stout.
No, that was just after the stroke.
Oh.
Well,
And I went somewhere one evening, and his bedtime was 10 o'clock. He lived by the clock. Now, me with all these clocks, he had one Seth Thomas mantel clock and one pocket watch. He refused a wristwatch. Anyway, I left Johnny with him one night. When I got home, I wondered how did everything go, and he was provoked. At 9:30, Johnny asked him, was he ready for his beer? And he said, no, he wasn't. And Johnny got it anyway, and it was only 9:30, not 10 o'clock. After the Guinness Stout came about, he was still able to get around, in spite of the stroke, but he couldn't talk. And we thought he couldn't read because he read a great deal. He took lots of his books here with him when he came to live here, and he would reread them, his favorites. And after the stroke, he didn't read anymore, so we thought he couldn't read. So Dorothy and Bob took him for dinner this one day, and I told Bob to wait a minute while I got the Guinness Stout, and Bob got mad at me. He said, do you think I can't buy my father-in-law Guinness myself? And I said, well, you know. So they went down, and Bob brought him the stout in a glass, and he poured it, put it down. My father took a sip, and he put it down, and he picked up the bottle. It was English stout. And he goes, ugh! And he wouldn't drink it. So he could read. So it was not Guinness's. And God forbid that he would touch anything English. So,
We're going to pause for 1 second.
the other funny thing about my dad, before we went to Ireland, we were asking him what might we see to look for. And he said, well, one thing, he said, once they put anything up over there, they never tear it down. They don't get rid of anything. It can be falling apart, but there it sits. And he was being critical. So we get over there, and we are at the farm where he was born. My cousin Michael owns now. And my dad's walking all over the place, walking, circling around, and he finally turned, he says, Michael, where's the blacksmith shop? My grandfather was the blacksmith. And Michael said, oh, we tore it down. Nobody uses horses anymore, they all have tractors. And my father was furious. They tore down the wrong thing, everything else could have stood, you know. So, and then we bought him a shirt. And it didn't have a pocket. And he's disgusted. These Irish don't know how to make shirts. They don't know how to put pockets in them. He didn't have a place to put his pen.
Your son's like that.
You have to have pockets.
He couldn't live without a pen in his pocket.
But he was 81 and he was a sharp. Just a beautiful trip. Without him, I don't think I'd have ever made another trip to Ireland. Good man. Good man.
As you're growing up, who were some of your heroes? Who were people you really look up to and modeled yourself after? You wanted to be like?
I was never a fan of movie stars, except as a little kid when we go see Pearl White and Buck Rogers, not Buck Rogers. We used to see serials. And the most exciting, awful episode was always at the end. You had to wait till next Saturday to see what happened. Pearl White would fall off the mountain, and somehow or other she didn't die. Next week she's okay. I don't know. It's been a long time ago.
How about today, any heroes? people you really admire and respect, other than your children?
I don't think I'm a hero worshiper. I can say I admired Kennedy as a president, and I can say I don't like Reagan, and I didn't like Nixon, I didn't like Johnson, I didn't like Ford. And I think it's tragic that we don't have a decent president for the size of our country.
If you could have any 3 wishes, what would they be?
I would like a long life, provided health goes with it. Because I'd like to enjoy all my children and my grandchildren. But I don't want to be a sickly old person. I hope I don't get seen then. Of course, if I do, Brian's promised he'll put me away.
I never said that.
Oh, yes, you did. Sure, Romy's son is making payments on her car, provided she didn't buy a foreign car, and she's 81 years old with her new car. And I asked you if you'd make payments if I bought a new car at 81. You said you'd put me away if I did. So, I guess, you know, if I can't buy my own car, I guess I do without a car.
Other wishes?
So, no, I thank God for the health I've got.
Have other people maybe thought of any other questions? Grandchildren?
Wait, she only asked,
Oh.
it was 3 things, that's only
Two
one.
more
Right,
wishes.
she's got 2 more wishes.
Well, I hope I don't go broke.
You?
Talk to Colleen. Okay, that's $12.
Wait for she to watch that.
I hope everyone treasures clocks the way I do.
I won't treasure
Put
clocks.
up with
Why do you treasure
secrecy.
clocks?
I don't even
What?
have clocks.
Why do you treasure clocks?
I don't know. I don't know.
Explain
Oh,
why.
well, my father treasured one clock, one watch. And when I did get to Ireland, I found out that one of his brothers was a clockmaker.
It's genetic.
So that's, yeah. And then, one set of cousins that I visited had a gorgeous clock, just beautiful. And I told them how I thought it was awfully nice, you know. The next time I went to Ireland, it was gone. And I asked them what happened to it. And I forget what they did with it, but if they had realized I liked it, I could have had it. So you should speak up if you want anything. Well, Kathleen's got it already. And this is what I didn't, you know, with my mother's and father's house. I didn't ask for anything. And others did, and they got a lot of stuff.
One
So-
more wish.
So this is one reason I have my auction. You have to let people know what you want. If you want it bad enough, you pay.
That was good that you gave us the money.
Oh, yeah. So what you really want, you
Just
get.
keep the cash.
All the money I gave you was only good for me. That was the sad thing.
One more wish, Mom. You said you wish to be healthy and a long life.
And I hope my children remain true to their faith and turn to God when they need Him. Thank God He's good for them. And I hope my children continue to be good the way they are now. I couldn't stand anything like that. I couldn't take it. Remember, I always said, be good.
Yes, Mom.
And I mean, Brian, be good.
I'm good.
Val, be good.
I'll be good.
Craig, behave yourself. Michael, Steve, Sharon, be good. Darren, oh, you too. Mary, and Dan, you might as well be good if you're going to be with Mary.
Can't get me.
Julie, behave yourself. Lily, behave yourself. And the ones that wouldn't hang around, let them know. There is a widow's curse. Did you know that?
We almost got that instead of the blessing.
You're liable to get it if you misbehaved. That's for sure.
Adam, repeat it,
That's
please.
for sure, because for generations and generations and generations, the widow that cursed the man in Ireland, it happened.
What happened?
You didn't hear about the widow's curse?
Tell us.
The Earl of Waterford had a widow and her son working in his estate. And the widow's son refused to go to school, and he wouldn't obey his mother. So she went to the Earl and asked him, please, use your influence and make him go to school. He just won't listen to me.
Okay.
So the Earl said, all right, bring the boy to me, and she did. And the boy was rebellious, and the Earl hung him. And the mother turned to him and she said, now, no older son of yours or any of your descendants will live to manhood. Not one. This was her curse. And for, I think, 5 generations, the eldest son of the Earl of Waterford has met a tragic death. And it's recorded. So be careful, because I'm a widow.
I'll be good, I'll be good.
Okay. Take it to heart, okay?
They should probably curse you this year.
If you were the eldest son of the Earl, would you live in fear, if I get in the car, I'm gonna have an accident, if I get on a horse, he's gonna throw me?
No, we're going to be attracted to garage sales for the rest of our lives.
Squeeze every penny tight before you spend it.
Tell us what some of the happiest times of your life were.
My wedding was very happy.
That's bad.
Well, I went through it in a daze. It was freezing cold, and I forgot my fur jacket and didn't even know I was cold. Somebody went back and got it for me. And we didn't go on the honeymoon because the weather was so terrible, so we went to our apartment. And then everybody came over the next day and helped put things away, and they were all our maids. And Father Jimmy was asking, was I good to work for you? Payroll, was I tipping?
I like the Jimmy.
Yeah, that was like fun.
What are the times of your life?
Well, I got a lot of happy times.
What ones really stand out?
When my kitchen was done, that was wonderful. And when I got a ceiling fan, oh my. The bathroom, that was a surprise. When Kathleen and Mark did the bathroom. And all they were supposedly doing was putting in a vanity, and they just kept it down because it was so dirty and messy. That was a real big surprise. I liked Julie better before she was a blonde. I still like Julie, but I liked the other hair better. I'm lucky I have April. Sweet little dog. You're lucky when we have Dave. And I think I've come through some really rough times since you arrived. It was been good.
Do you have any regrets?
That Daddy died so young. That you got married before you were 28. You broke tradition. And tradition,
nails.
I put spoons in a bowl again because it was tradition.
Painting?
Oh, yeah, when Danny thought he was doing
Oh,
me a favor. he
that
got
went up
me.
back on the wall, huh?
Oh, yeah. the Christmas that Danny bought me a painting of the seaside and the sky. It took down the Blessed Virgin from over the mantle and I cried. She belongs up there.
Tell us more about Dad.
There's a difference between being smart and being wise. And he was both. And he was gentle, strong, very good man. And it's just too bad that God didn't let him stay around longer. But you have good genes because he was your dad. In fact, we had a neighbor that gave me no credit whatever for my children. She said, because I had such a good husband. She was German, and she just thought that she loved that he was German. I used to be very small, and Brian was such a nice, healthy, rosy baby. It wasn't anything I had anything to do with. It was because I had a good husband. So what else? Daddy had the problem of loving food too much. And just don't put on the weight that he did. Get rid of the weight you already got. But that was in his genes. All of his family had to fight food. Some way and some way. But he was honorable. He would never gossip about anyone. And one of his co-workers told me that the best thing he ever heard from Daddy, they were complaining about someone who just gave them an awfully rough time. And Daddy just says, well, just never stoop to his level. That's what he is. You would have had a good father-in-law, though. He never saw the daughter-in-law, he never saw a son-in-law, he never saw Danny or anyone. Ever saw a grandchild? And the day before he had his stroke, as sick as he was making popcorn for Johnny and Tommy and Greg Stricker, entertaining him. As sick as he was, he loved the kid. And then on the way to the hospital, he told me at the time.
And what did he say?
And then he asked Kathleen, is those Irish cops got fresh returned? They did. Kathleen was a very pretty little girl. And he was thankful for his family. His one good friend told me many times he asked, what did he do in life to deserve the children that God gave him? So he lived long enough to before that.
Something happened when we were pulling out of the back, or Dad was backing out.
Oh, you
You are a venial
Mary
the
wanted that.
vanity. He came in one day and he says, Margaret, did you notice what a beautiful child Johnny is? And Kathleen said, shame on you, Daddy. You know, he looks just like you.
What led up to that?
You always said I
What led up to it?
Yeah. Mary said there was something when Daddy was backing the car out of the drive and I
Oh,
was
he just-
playing in the way and getting in the way. Or something like that. And so I
He just
couldn't-
looked in the rearview mirror and saw you. You know, I didn't know about that. I just knew he looked in the rearview mirror and saw you. And my mother, when Daddy died, said, Margaret, you haven't lost Tony because Johnny was just like you. But he...
Wait until he was 28.
Everyone was 28. Some were even 30, 31. My brothers, my father, my husband. Broke tradition.
But for a good reason.
You think so?
My mom thinks so.
Well, just be sure you get your degree. Okay. Be sure you're a good husband. He's probably too young to know how to do it.
No, he's a good guy.
Be a good man. Be a good
I'm gonna turn it off for a second.
But one thing about my mother, she had a very, very hearty laugh. And Danny came home one time from school. He'd been laughing in the classroom and he was corrected and scolded for doing it. And he said, but sister, I can't help it. I laugh just like my grandma does. Well, my mother's family had a store in Ireland. They called it a drapery store. And they would sell things like sheets and towels and clothing and shoes. And my father was a traveling salesman. His father was a blacksmith and he did live on a farm, but he didn't do farm work. And he had taken business courses, which used to, and my father was a real mathematician. He could do algebra, geometry, he had a real good mind. So he wasn't interested in the farming, but anyway, they met because he used to visit my grandmother's store to sell stock. And then they became interested in each other. And my mother used to send her young brother to the corner. My dad would come on a bicycle. He lived in Musgrave. My mother was in Margaret, which is now Portlaoise. And he'd come by Brian to call on her. My mother's working in the store for her mother. So she'd have Uncle Tom stand on the corner, and when he'd see Uncle Tim coming, or Tim coming on the bike, he'd run in. So my mother'd have time to comb her hair, fix herself up. But because he came from the farm, because he came from the Midlands and not the big city, my grandmother thought that he was beneath them, and they do have a caste in Ireland. We had friends when we were growing up that came from my mother's hometown, and she told me in Ireland my mother wouldn't speak to her because my mother had a pony and trap to go to church, and this woman went on her bicycle. They were just two different, levels of society. And this is why my mother came to this country, because she wanted to marry my father and she didn't want friction with her mother. But she never told us this. We found this out long after she was dead. My Aunt Peg told us. And then my father saved up to follow her, and he wanted to ride on the Titanic, which was the big thing that time. And when he went to get his ticket, they were all sold out. He just was crushed, and he had to take some other boat to come out. And of course, he was in New York when the news came that the Titanic went down. But anyway, my grandmother got over her bigotry. And we used to get many, many packages from Ireland. She sent me my baptismal dress, and she sent me my first communion dress, and we used to get letters. but she was very formal, and I always used to be so surprised. Her letters to my mother ended, "Your fond mother, Margaret Higgins." You know, she was just very formal, very dignified.
How did your mom convince your parents to let her come out to the States?
Well, I don't know that. They just,
She just came?
she supposedly came on a visit. One of her friends had been in Cleveland and went back to Ireland and raved about how nice it was here in Cleveland. And it was easy to get jobs, and people were friendly, people were very nice. So maybe she told her mother she just wanted to come and see the place. I don't know. That I don't know. But, and she was a saleswoman.
Tell us about that, the hats.
Oh,
My mother was a milliner, and at that time, women wore birds and feathers and flowers and, you know, huge hats, and they worked in commission, and the more stuff she put on the hat, the more money she'd make. And she was the only non-Jewish person in the department, and her co-workers called her the Irish Jew. And her customers would come in and they wanted Miss Higgins to wait on them. Nobody but Miss Higgins, because she did the best hats. And they were all fond of her. When my mother got married, they gave her a beautiful set of silverware that my sister Betty has now. So,
How did she decide when she traveled? How did she decide which places to stay at?
when they were vacationing in Ireland, my mother and Peg were the two that would pair off. They'd go to this place that was like Cedar Point, and they'd have the boardwalk, and they had places like rooming houses, I suppose you'd call it, or like whatever. So they'd walk and they'd look at the places where they had fellas' hats hanging. And the ones that had more fellas' hats, they'd try to get a room there. And the one time, she and Peg had dates. The fellows were to pick them up. And then somebody else came along and asked her for a date that she liked better. So she told Peg that she thought maybe this is the one she'd go with. And they rode bikes this time, you know, at this stage. So she let the air out of her tires. And the original guys come, and my mother goes out, and she's oh so surprised. She has flat tires. I just can't go. And so Peg went off with the two fellows, and my mother waited for the other one to come along and got the tires fixed. In fact, my father knew Peg before he knew my mother. And then he met my mother, and he liked her better.
Show
But
us,
they used to have fun.
show us what Grandma used to do with her teeth to entertain her
Oh,
grandchildren.
no, that I'll never show.
I don't remember
What
that.
she used to do.
Oh, dear. She wanted to startle the kids, and she'd make her teeth, she'd manipulate them. No, that I'll never do, never. But I used to tell myself that if I ever have grandchildren, I will never be a clown the way my mother was. And I think maybe I got almost as bad. She loved playing with the kids, and she used to love taking them downtown for lunch and shopping. And after they'd go home, she'd collapse. She wore herself out.
What were your thoughts when you were going to become a grandmother? When you reached that stage? How did it feel?
It felt nice. It was a nice feeling, and I felt badly.
Wait for that. Competing with that, I don't think you would. Okay.
No, I just felt badly that Daddy wasn't here. I thought it was so nice to have grandchildren that he was missing.
Tell us about Euclid Beach, Mom. Some advice that your mother used to give your children? How to get into the rides for free?
Oh, I never knew that. They told me afterwards. Well, it's very expensive to take little kids to a place like that where you pay for every darn ride there is.
Betty?
Now you pay an admission and it's included, but it didn't used to be like that.
So what happened?
And I don't remember that she told me to walk backwards. This is what Brian tells me.
Can I tell you off camera?
Sure. Can I put you on camera?
You can put
Just
me
for
on
this?
camera.
We're going to pan over to Brian Liderbach now, son number 1.
Documentary.
Grandma used to take Dan and I to Euclid Beach quite regularly. And at that time, it was, you paid for each ride as you got on. And so Grandma showed us that you could get onto the rides for free if you walked backwards through the exit turnstiles.
I can't believe that.
And it was really neat, and it worked, except that after a while, the guys that managed the rides,
Caught on.
well, I think they always did catch on, but they didn't want to say anything to a grandmother with her grandchildren. But they finally did, and they finally did come up to Grandma, and they said, "Lady," something to the effect that, "Lady, you really can't do this. You got to pay and come in the front gate," you know. And of course, she was very insulted, and you know, she couldn't believe that they would believe that she would be attempting such. She was grossly insulted. And if it was today, she probably would have sued them for, you know. But she did teach, and it was great fun. Dan and I, we just loved to go to Euclid Beach with Grandma.
Just the
And
3 of you?
Huh?
Just the 3 of you?
I think it was. I think Susan was still too young. And I remember the favorite ride, we'd get on the Bug. If you remember the Bug, those little cars that would go up and down around. And Grandma would get on there with it, and you'd get bounced all around. And we could never believe that Grandma was young enough to get on this thing with us.
Yeah,
Much, yeah. And, oh, she was just great. And then she would teach us how to sneak back on again. And we thought that was even better.
Did she do it too?
Oh, yeah.
She would walk backwards?
Yeah, she did it with us. Sure. She snuck on.
What did Mom say when she found out about it?
My recollection was that my mother was not real happy because we were being taught to cheat. I know she was not happy to hear that we were being taught to do this, but we just thought it was great. And my grandmother's answer was, "We're not hurting anything because the ride is going to go whether we pay or not." That was always her answer. So it's not as if you're stealing money from the bank, right? Because the ride is going to go whether we're there or not.
Thank you.
I guess I remember the good things.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, that's good if you're a grandchild.
Let's see, what else do we have? How about Susan taking Mark to the store?
Susan took Mark to the grocery store one time in his stroller. Came home without him. We asked her where was Mark, and she didn't know. She hadn't taken him. She had no idea. We told her, yes, you did have him. She said, no, she didn't have him. But we went back up to the corner, and here's Mark sitting in the stroller, enjoying watching all the people go by. Happy as a lark, but there he sat, right where she left him. Of course, Susan had a way of leaving a lot of things behind. I think 3 or 4 times they called from the store to say that she left her wallet. They were holding it for her.
How about Brian taking John to the store?
Brian was going to the dry cleaners one time, and he took Johnny along, and I told him to wait a minute till I got the harness. And Brian was very indignant that I should think he needed a harness for his brother. But he found out he should have done it, because he took his hand, he let go of your hand long enough to get the money out to pay for the dry cleaning. And that's how long it took Johnny to be in the middle of Lee Road. You were a little shook. You were a little shook.
And Brian was an
So
adult.
after that,
Oh, sure.
Johnny was harnessed any other time. And many a dirty look we got.
Torturing your son.
But now they have something different. Now they have like
Handcuffs.
handcuffs. And we saw that at Disneyland. This youngster was handcuffed to her mother.
Sure she wasn't under
The
arrest?
handcuff wasn't that tight. There was this much room between them. So they still have kids like that for him once in a while.
Get a little bored.
A little too active, a little too curious, too busy.
What about some memories from when we used to go to the cottages?
In fact,
Oh.
I have a harness put away for your children.
Do you really?
I do.
Is it my old harness or you?
Yeah. Yeah.
You have a strap for the bed too?
Yes. Yes.
When was I?
Yeah, Johnny didn't like to go to bed at night. And we'd put him to bed. And of course, I'm not a young mother, you remember. And it's upstairs, you know, and then pretty soon here comes Johnny all beaming, you know, all ready for fun. Back upstairs, put Johnny to bed again. Next thing you know, Johnny's back down. So I got a sleep safe harness and pinned him in lovingly, kissed you goodnight and told you what a sweet, darling, darling little boy you were. And I didn't want you to fall and get hurt. And he couldn't get out of bed. Same thing we used for Brian, but for a different reason. We didn't have a crib for Brian, we had a youth bed. And it was a beautiful youth bed that I saved and saved until my father decided it was taking up a lot of room and some child could use it, and it went to St. Vincent de Paul. But it didn't have railings like a crib, so Brian had a sleep safe harness so he wouldn't fall off. And Johnny had one so that I didn't have to keep running upstairs to get back to bed, time after time after time.
About any memories from when we used to be at cottages? Mary, what was that? When's?
Well, the story I heard when you were expecting Mark. And we had
I don't
strippers
remember
and
that.
costumes, and that you left to go back to Cleveland to do laundry, and
And didn't come back.
they never came back.
It was more peaceful at home.
Yeah.
Yeah, the last cottage we had, Daddy refused to come. I remember calling him from Madison's and he stayed home.
Sunday drives? Memories about those? Dad waiting in the car?
Well, everybody begging for a Dairy Queen or an ice cream cone.
Wrong side of the road.
Wrong side of the road. Daddy always said no, he couldn't come that. You have to let him know when it's on the right side. And he hated to stop. We were in Vermillion one time. This is one thing really that's critical. I mean, it's a criticism of him. We were going to visit his cousin Edna. And we knew her address. We couldn't find the street. And we drove up and down and around and just tried so hard to find that street. And I asked him, well, stop at a gas station and inquire. And this he refused to do. Absolutely refused to ask for help. And so we came home. We never saw Edna.
That's tremendous.
Not that trip.
Are you like that, Brian?
Hmm?
Are you like that?
Yes.
I'm not that bad.
He's-
I wouldn't
no,
turn
he's-
around and come
He's a lot
home.
better. He gets better.
Before I turn around and come home, I would stop at a gas station, but I can relate to that.
He refused to ask.
Mom, do you have any advice for your children on how to be good parents? What are some tricks for raising good children?
Or what's a good parent?
Or what is a good parent? Yeah.
I've done awfully well at it for
I
Mario.
think a lot of people would say you are a real good parent. What was some advice? What would you pass on? Things to remember. How about to be a good husband or wife?
Well, talk, communicate. talk things out. I think the important thing is that I was lucky that I had a good husband. God gave me good children.
I don't think you had anything to do with that.
Well, I mothered them. I don't know. I think I was stricter. Now I used to spank. I used to be angry when they would misbehave. And nowadays people don't believe in spanking. But I still do.
I know why you're laughing. But that's okay. I'm going to be the same kind of grandmother, and every grandmother deserves to be able to be that way.
You mean you're going to believe that spanking is necessary periodically?
For your own children. But when you're a grandmother, you shouldn't be expected.
Oh, like Bill
or-
Cosby's grandmother said, "Don't you touch that child." All he did was try to burn down the house.
Well, it's like, grandmothers, you've done that already. You've done it when you had to do it. Because they were your kids that you
I
got every
was
day.
stricter with the older ones, and they used to tell me, "Johnny got away with murder."
That's
But
the
I
truth.
never let them
Picking
do
them all.
what he could do.
Mhm.
And they tell me that if my father and mother didn't come to live here, that Johnny would have been completely ruined. So he
But
had a
it's-
strict grandpa that made him toe the line.
Let's talk about that a little.
Well, my
What happened
father,
there?
my father was, I don't remember, I just know that he took over because there was no father in the house. I don't remember what you did that he made you stop doing. And this is what your brothers and sisters tell me, that he's the one that saved you.
We didn't let you drill holes in the furniture anymore.
He stopped that. He wouldn't let you burn up the couch in the basement.
You used to
He destroyed Daddy's gun because he didn't want a gun in the house, because he didn't want you to get in.
I kept playing
You drilled holes in the furniture?
that.
She was a
His
bad
own
kid.
good maple bed. He carved holes in the middle and he
You thought you were marrying a good guy,
I
huh?
found Dad's
I'm worried
drills.
about the kids.
I found all Dad's tools. He was practicing.
He liked to play with
Lilia,
matches.
what you do is you wait. You don't let your children hear these
Any of
stories.
these. Any of
No. Well, that,
Wait a minute, is this thing on now?
No,
They're still on.
stop.
I was gonna say, Dan came over to our house one time, and we had always told our, why can't you behave like, Dad and Uncle John and Uncle Mark, treat each other. Look at how nice they are to each other. Isn't that wonderful? And then Dan had to say, when you're a dad, and I was like, oh, we're not supposed
They
to
did
tell
things
them.
that I never knew about until many,
Dan and I
many
did
years
things that
went
if our
by.
kids ever do, I'll kill them.
Well, Brian,
You deserved every minute of it, Mary.
Oh, no,
Wait a minute.
no, it wasn't Mary. They didn't do terrible things to Mary.
No,
they,
no,
they did
no,
terrible things
Casey
to
was
Susan.
Yeah,
yeah,
what?
they dumped Susan in garbage
Oh.
cans. We had puppies, and you forbid us to come and look at the puppies. We couldn't bring our friends in.
I don't remember that.
Oh yeah, you sat in the kitchen, and it was your kitchen and.
Why? Why wouldn't
Because
we
you were the
allow it?
boss. 'Cause I don't know. Because you were mean.
Take the light.
I was probably trying to protect you. I don't know. I don't remember that.
And how many times was it you made cherry pies?
Mary's talking.
for yourself?
Oh, give me a break with the cherry pies. I wanted to make sure they were perfect before anybody else ate them.
So I ate the whole
So you ate the whole thing?
And someone asked Brian, "How did you eat the pie so
never mind. Thank you.
fast?" And he said, "Well, I'll show you."
Oh
Wait a
my
Yes.
You want me to turn it towards people that are
Well, it
No,
used to break
I think
my
we'll leave it
heart
just like
when
this,
Brian
yeah.
and Danny teased Susan. It
Thanks.
was
It's just a
awful.
little too crazy. Spinning it all over.
It really was.
It was a
I
terrible.
must say.
And we finally got her to realize that if she didn't let them make her cry, they'd quit doing it. So finally, one of the happiest moments of my life when I found Brian and Danny and Susan were friends.
When was that?
Oh.
She's not
dear.
through yet.
Couple years ago.
No, anyway, they finally became friends, and that was wonderful. And I can't remember how long it took.
Oh,
What were you going to say?
the way we became friends. Susan decided to be a boy. I thought that's what you were leading up to.
Well, I had two girls that decided to be boys. All it took was cutting your hair, because boys had short hair, girls had long hair. When Mark was born, here we had a string of girls, and now there's a boy. And joy! Oh, what a joy.
Oh, but you're jumping.
Well, I just wanted to say about Sharon. So Sharon was very upset because this family only liked boys. And so while I was still in the hospital, she turned herself into a boy. All she had to do was cut her hair. And that's what it was.
But 10 years prior to that, or
Prior
however
to
many years
that,
it was, that
Brian and Danny told Susan they wanted to cut her hair, and she'd be one of the gang. And so she sat and let them cut her hair.
Oh, no.
And Susan was the one whose hair took a long, long, long time to get long and pretty. And there it went. Just like that. But anyway, I finally was happy that Brian and Danny and Susan were friends. Bobby Stricker was like that with Diane. And it's only very recently that I liked Bobby because I couldn't stand what he did to his sister. And then Lillian Liderbach, my sister-in-law, tells me that Al and Jim tormented her unbelievably. Just this might be in your genes, so be careful. So Lillian said her only protection was her strong nails, and Jim went to his death with scars on his arms that she fought him when he would torment her. So, older brothers are nasty to their little sisters.
and to their little brothers, as we are learning.
Good, yeah.
Goes with the territory.
Yeah.
Who?
It's your fault,
I
Dad.
wonder.
Can't imagine.
Who they're talking about.
Mary, can you think of anything else?
Yeah.
Okay. Sharon?
Thinks that's your fault.
Mhm.
Brian, any?
I'm tapped out.
Yeah. What haven't we asked you, Mom? What could we have asked that would have let us get to know who you are better? What does it mean to be Irish?
It's the most wonderful thing. The Irish are only saints and scholars. My mother taught me that. She wouldn't lie.
I've heard there was some drunkards or
There
some.
was one bad one in her home.
I heard you had some
What?
French and Spanish blood in your body.
Shh! Be
Is
still.
there any truth to that scandal?
No, the French is in Daddy's side.
Oh, okay.
With
How about
me,
Spanish?
No Spanish. Oh yeah, Spanish and Scotch. Yeah.
Mm.
In your blood?
My father had Spanish, and his mother's name was Guidera. Not Spanish name.
I never heard that. What about the one bad Irish person?
Well, you couldn't believe a bad Irishman in Ireland. They sent him to Australia. He was a disgrace. And I thought, well, now my mother's sister Jo was Tom O'Riordan's mother, and I wondered if he heard the story. And I asked him, did he hear about the one in the town that had to be sent to Australia? And Tom said, yeah. But he came back and he inherited the family business, and he's no better than he ever was, and he ruined everything. But that was too bad that one, you know.
Tell us about Grandma in the hospital, hearing about people bad-mouthing the Irish.
Oh, she was dying of myasthenia gravis. And it was weakness, you know, just terrible weakness. And she had been so close to death when they made the diagnosis that it took a long time for the medication to give her any energy at all. So we went to visit her this one day, and we found her sitting up in bed. She had these big, beautiful blue eyes, huge eyes, and her eyes are just bright. She's sitting there. And she said, "You should have been here 10 minutes ago." I said, "I'm not an eavesdropper, but the people in the next room were talking so loud and I couldn't help but hear them and the things they were saying about the Irish. If this was my deathbed, I couldn't have sat here. I had to go in and tell them what the Irish really are." She got out of the bed and went into the next room. And it was her deathbed. We were positive, that she lived another 2 years.
Is there anything we haven't asked that you'd like to say?
Well, I wish I was more like my mother. She had a beautiful sense of humor. She had tremendous style sense, which my sisters inherited. She would never set foot out of her bedroom in the morning until she was completely dressed. Makeup, jewelry, the works. She always... In fact, she used to, even living here, she wanted me to take her shopping. She loved clothes. But she stressed the fact that she wasn't extravagant because her sister Peg loved to have her send clothes to Ireland. So she would buy new things, which gave her an excuse to get rid of the old. So it wasn't extravagance in the least. But Peg did like getting them. That was true. And she loved living here because the girls were dating and she used to love to see their boyfriends come and see them dress up. And she had fun. Now, even my little Sarah wishes I was more like my mother. Cora stopped over here one morning and Sarah looks at me through the storm door. "House coat!" And of course I'm in my house coat. So they came in, I'm doing some laundry and puttering around. And they were here maybe a half hour and Sarah again goes, "House coat!" You don't do these things, you're supposed to get dressed if you get them. And I wasn't dressed.
But you're not hooked on the soaps.
No.
And your mother was definitely hooked on the soaps.
If I would call her, she'd say, "Margaret, call me back. My program is on."
I used to spend a lot of time at my grandmother's house, and my job was to answer the phone. Because all afternoon my grandmother would sit in the kitchen listening to the radio. Portia Faces Life and Stella Dallas. Those are the two that I remember. And if the phone rang or anybody came to the door, my job was to go and say, "I'm sorry, my grandmother can't come to the phone right now," or "My grandmother can't come to the door right now, please come back or call back later." There was no way she was going to leave that radio. Nothing short of the house burning down would have gotten her to leave that radio.
Tell us about Dad and his music.
Oh, he loved, well, my mother loved music and she liked it loud and she had to, and that's the way Daddy was. He liked his loud music. My father didn't like it. He liked it soft, But the Daddy's last Christmas was the year that the singing nun, what was the song? Dominique. And it was really the song hit, and I'm downtown shopping and they used to have these people, standing up and selling records. So I bought 2 Dominique records, one for us and one for my mother. And Daddy played it at home and he loved it and his reaction was, "What a pity. Such a beautiful piece of music to be on such a cheap record." So anyway, Saturday, my father quit driving when he was maybe 75 or so I was doing their shopping and I was doing their laundry. And I came back with groceries this one day and found Daddy in the dining room with my mother, the 2 of them listening to Dominique. He felt that it was such a beautiful song, it wasn't right for her to have to wait until Christmas to hear it. And I had the car, so he had Brian take him down so he could get that record to her quick. And the 2 of them sitting there loving every minute of it. He had tears rolling down his cheeks. It was a beautiful song. But they shared the same love for music, the two of them. In fact, I didn't work when Johnny was still little, and I did babysitting, and I had this one little, not little girl, she was a big 12-year-old who was blind and retarded, little Jeannie. And my mother had been a real wonderful pianist. And when she was ill, she said no more, she couldn't play the piano anymore, she just wasn't up to it. And we found how Jeannie loved music, and my mother sat at the piano in order to make Jeannie happy. And her fingers flew just as well, you know, And Johnny used to be so proud of himself if Jeannie was to go to the bathroom or in the kitchen, he'd take her hand and guide her around. And then I went to the bank one day and left Jeannie at the dinner table with my father. And I got home and he was so proud of himself. Jeannie had finished lunch, and after lunch she used to be taken into the bathroom, and she refused to get up, just flatly refused. And my dad sensed that maybe she wanted a second helping of something, and that's what it was. And he was so proud that he was able to give her what she wanted and understood. She couldn't talk. She just couldn't talk, the poor child. And April's taken us all in with 2 ears up for a change. Isn't that nice? Double ears. Something's going on. She never does that. But Jeannie was a good experience. And we had a neighbor, remember Mrs. Hannah? She used to come over and she used to play for Jeannie. Everyone tried so hard to help this little one be a happy child. She was a twin who had been blinded by the oxygen in the incubator. And her twin was fine. The twin was little. She wore heavy glasses, but her mind was all right. But she didn't like her twin sister. Well, I suppose it's natural. Children don't realize, you know, they resented the fact that she was handicapped. And Jeannie knew that. Her sisters used to come pick her up after school, take turns. And if the twin came, Jeannie wouldn't go. She'd cling to me. She tried to save Liderbach. Some way she had my name. She talked funny. She had the mind of maybe a year and a half old child. And she, as I say, was like a year and a half old baby, and she was big for her age. Her father was a big man. When her father would pick her up, she'd want a horseback ride, and she'd want to get an ice cream cone. And he would take her on give her a horseback ride up to Franklin. It used to be a Meadowbrook. And then, that was something. Talk about something happy. What's happy? The wedding was nice. We
I
had
think
beautiful
this weekend.
hotel. This was a beautiful.
Yeah.
This was a nice weekend.
Really terrific weekend.
What happened this weekend, Mom?
We had a reception. You renewed your vows. We were at St. Anne's, and we had a whole lot of Liderbachs and a whole lot of Quinlans.
So the one
But
that
we
got
didn't have
married
any
to-
Vegas there. Only Liderbach-Vega was the only one. But it was nice. It was real nice. And everybody pitched in and helped. And then today for the time and everything. So that was really nice. That was really good.
I think it was real special to see, you know, one couple who had been married for a week, and the other couple who had been married for 40 years.
I'm thinking of that way.
And just, you know, I mean, both occasion was real special, real happy.
That was nice. Bless you.
I think it's the bewitching hour.